and then we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to Design Thinkers Wanted, How to Break into UX Career Paths. My name is Sumaya. I'm a founder at UX Woman. I have about 9 years now of expertise across startups, consulting, and corporate. And most recently, I've specialized in inclusive design for brands like Disney, Hulu, Marvel, ABC, FX, Free Conference Call. And, to kind of give a summary of my career, I got started in consulting as a design researcher, working for brands like Ford, Meta, J&J. And then I started to work in-house for smaller businesses, corporations, startups. I went back to grad school for 2 years. I did a lot of freelancing in that time. And then when I got out of grad school, I founded Ideate Labs with my partner. We shut that down last year, and now I'm the founder of UX Woman. And as I was, going through that, the first successful startup journey, Ideate Labs was our first successful startup. Both of us had actually failed at multiple startups. Before that, 3 startups to be to be exact. We had failed at 3 different startups each. So, it just shows that trial and error helps. But, as I was, building Ideate Labs, I also was a UX manager at Free Conference Call, which then led me to my role at Disney. And my manager at Disney actually discovered me through a YouTube video of a presentation I did, very similar to this one, around inclusive design. And they wanted someone who was a curriculum builder, a teacher, a facilitator, and a researcher. So I just happened to luck out on just being discovered through YouTube for Disney Plus. So you just never know where you're going to get your next break, right? And I'm just telling you that, to kind of set the scene of what my career path has been like. You can ask me questions at the end of the call. But what I'd like to do is just kind of give a quick summary of what we're going to be going through today. So we're going to talk through some introductions and ground rules. We're going to talk about what is design thinking in particular. We're going to talk about some laws of UX, and we're going to see how design and the design process and design thinking is much more than just the user perspective. It requires a really thoughtful business perspective and tech perspective as well. And then we're finally going to get into creative career paths, because we have to really understand what design is, what design thinking in the process is, to really understand how each of us can fit into UX as a career path and how each of us can break into UX. So I'm your facilitator for today. Fun fact, I started out in mechanical engineering and then I pivoted into UX design. And some ground rules before we begin. I want to make our time as efficient together as possible, so please mute yourself and only unmute if you would like to share something or when I ask a question. Otherwise, we can definitely keep talking and networking on the chat. Just be kind and open-minded. And we always just want to create an environment that is psychologically safe, where both good and bad ideas can be shared openly and freely. This is a no judgment zone. So just build on each other's ideas. One element of the design community is we have an exercise called yes and. So when we're in a workshop, we will always listen to someone's ideas and then go yes and, rather than negate it or say no but. Right? And that just builds a more creative environment, and an environment where people feel safe sharing wilder or bolder or more thoughtful ideas. I'm a big nerd, so welcome to the Nerd Zone. I like to get into the details of things. And if you have a specific question, feel free to let me know. What is UX Woman? A lot of you might have discovered us through emails or social media or LinkedIn. We focus on providing a 7-month design MBA focused on introducing women, immigrants, people of color into UX design. We want to make UX really accessible to all, and we want to help women earn 6-figure salaries. And it's getting harder to break into tech. I will not, say, I will have to just call out the elephant in the room. But I just think that the tech world is changing, right? With AI, and new technology advances, as well as new culture changes. We just all have to just keep reacting to what's happening. But I also have some optimism to share at the end of the call. So what is design thinking? According to the Interaction Design Foundation, there's a long-winded, kind of boring definition of it. It's design thinking is a nonlinear, iterative process that teams use to understand users, challenge assumptions, redefine problems, and create innovative solutions to prototype and test, which is a really great summary of the design process. Really, I would say it's a process of collaborating to define problems and then find innovative solutions. And I would add, we need to define monetizable problems, right? If we're defining problems that could be a community idea or a nonprofit idea, those are great. But if we're trying to get hired at different companies, especially the Fortune 500s, you really have to have that additional layer of business strategy. What will make an impact in terms of growing revenue or conversion rates? But also what's feasible from a tech perspective, and potentially today how you can leverage AI in your design process or design an AI feature. A lot of different companies are already releasing AI features. We have AI on Netflix, Spotify, Google Search, Google Maps, even in dating with profiles like Bumble, Hinge, Tinder. So AI is really starting to be everywhere, and that is just going to be part of the bread and butter of UX moving forward. When we think of design thinking, we're thinking, of a design process that could span any duration. So this is a visual from the Nielsen Norman Group, and design can span anywhere from 2 weeks in terms of a sprint to 2 months to even 2 years. And it just depends on the project. But the general process is empathizing with users, conducting user research, defining the scope of what problem we're trying to build with stakeholders, or marrying the user perspective with the business and tech perspectives, ideating on potential solutions, prototyping some of those final solutions, testing them, and then finally implementing one product or one feature out into the market that we're sure is going to win in the market. So what we really need is both qualitative and quantitative data to back up that before we launch an idea, we can prove to stakeholders, whether they're investors or CEOs, that yes, our idea or feature is going to win in the market and be successful. Otherwise, CEOs and senior stakeholders and investors are pretty reluctant to invest millions of dollars in design and dev resources to building something new. And there's another way to visualize the design process, which is the double diamond. So this is kind of what we use at UX Woman. And UX Woman spans 4 months of coursework and 3 months of career coaching. So that's the 7-month design MBA. In the first 6 weeks of the program, we define our brief, we diverge, we talk to 15 to 20 users in our area or topic space. We do some primary and secondary research. That takes the first 3 weeks. Between weeks 3 and 6, we're really condensing and synthesizing our insights into themes and opportunity areas. We're doing both. We did a lot of qualitative research, but now we're doing more quantitative research to really scope down all our different ideas and opportunities. And so by the time we get to midterms, we have one MVP solution. We also go through an AI product design module. So as we're scoping down our different ideas, we're considering how to add AI into the mix, how to build an MVP AI feature, because that is doable nowadays with large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, and it is feasible today to build an MVP product that incorporates AI. So that's not a far-reaching goal like it used to be, let's say, even just 3 or 4 years ago. And once we get to midterms, we've defined our MVP solution. We have built a business model for our solution. So that means that our solution has been vetted, that it'll be monetizable, and we have some amount of quantitative proof to investors and stakeholders that this idea is going to win in the market, and it's going to be the best idea out of all the possible ideas that we have brainstormed. And that's when we spent the next 5 weeks or so designing that one MVP. So we're in Figma, we're designing the information architecture, user flows, wireframes. We're building a design system from scratch for our unique topic idea, and we're prototyping. So that's giving you a gist of what the design process is like. Research focuses on designing the right thing. So research focuses heavily on the problem space versus design focuses on the solution space. So the first half of the double diamond is all about really defining the problem and really defining through qualitative and quantitative data, the scope of the problem. What separates a junior researcher from a senior researcher is that a senior researcher is able to define scope versus a junior researcher just conducts the research. So if you are someone who is at your mid-career thinking that you have transferable skills to pivot into more of a mid-level position, you might want to learn more on the scoping side, which involves really talking to a lot of business and tech stakeholders at the company, marrying those perspectives with the user perspective to scope the right type of product. Just another way to envision the design process. But what I really found once we actually dig into it, and whether you're working at a startup, corporate, consulting, I've worked at all of them, or even if you're working on a student project at UX Woman, the design process really just looks like this. It's really research is a lot about untangling a whole bunch of uncertainty and gathering that qualitative and quantitative data. And finally coming up with that MVP concept, usually during midterms, and then, having more smooth sailing or clarity and focus from there. So this is actually my favorite visual of the design process, and I think it's the most relevant one that, you will ever see. And I think there's a good news to this, right? Because when we have a lot of uncertainty, that means doing a lot of strategy work. That's UX strategy, UX design strategy, business strategy. And that's not something that I think AI will be able to do in the next 5 to 10 years. AI can certainly facilitate that. There's lots of great AI tools like ChatGPT to help with, recording interviews, interview transcripts, even some basic synthesis. But it really requires a person to be behind that strategy, right? And to really assess whether AI is creating the right outputs or not. So whether you're going for a UX research or UX design career path, it's important to be really strategy focused, business focused, and really understand UX, business, and tech strategy. That's what's going to land you the job, especially when a lot of the more production level tasks are going to be taken over by AI, right? So back when I was a junior researcher, I used to take notes for projects with the senior researchers. I would help senior researchers with deliverables. Now AI could potentially take my job, right? AI could take a junior job by doing the note taking. However, even for juniors, it means they just have to level up on their strategy. And what are you contributing in terms of your ideation and in terms of your thought process, in terms of your methodology? That's this, the unique element that you bring to the table when production level tasks are taken away by AI. So long story short, we basically need to reframe traditional perspectives as we move from problem to solution. We need to communicate our insights in a way that reframes the problem and the solution. And it's simply about finding new ways to look at the world and then talk about it. So we tend to focus on new product innovation and ideation because anyone can redesign an existing app, correct? We can always, find some UI on Netflix or Spotify and do some, refresh work, but that's not really innovative. What makes something innovative is their unique business strategy, their unique business model, targeting an invisible market, which is Blue Ocean strategy, or targeting a unique market, or having a unique perspective when it comes to designing something in an existing market. So that's what we focus on because that helps our students stand out from the crowd and not create cookie cutter projects that everyone has in their portfolio. So when you focus on innovation, you start to learn the design process ins and outs because you're doing a lot of strategy work and you're building something that ideally hasn't been built before, or you're having a whole fresh new take on it, right? So you're thinking more like a startup. And that means that you're building a unique design system, you're designing a unique business model from scratch, and all your UX strategy is from scratch. So you should be able to, apply any UX methodology once you graduate and consult on UX projects and know when to apply what method and how to convince business stakeholders about the efficacy of your methods and why your methods are going to have such a high impact. So that's why we really focus on an interdisciplinary approach to the design process. And I know I keep saying that, but what does that actually mean? So the most valuable designs lie at the intersection of desirability, viability, and feasibility. User perspectives, or do they want this, is just 1/3 of the design process. So let that sink in, because most UX courses, boot camps really just focus on the usability side, and they don't really focus on the other two elements. Viability is the business perspective. Should we do this? Is there going to be a return on investment? If I'm a startup and an investor is investing $2 million into me, or if I'm a large corporate and I have a project budget of $100,000, should we do it? Is it worth doing it? Will we have impact to show after we spent all that money that we had an impact? That's how stakeholders are thinking about it. And when we think about feasibility, can we do this? So that's the tech perspective. How long does it take to build? What do we need? How can we scope down the simplest version of our product? And to dive into this a little bit more, when we think about desirability or the user perspective, we're thinking about, does it fill a need? Will it fit into people's lives? How do we make them want it? When we think about business goals, we're thinking about, does it align with business goals? What's the return on investment? Can it be done within a budget? How much do we need to spend and how much will we earn back, right? And then feasibility, what are the tech constraints? How long will it take? So I guess the reason, we talk to users, first of all, is especially in the strategy world, if you're going to build an innovative product, you really need to be talking to users. And there's a reason for it. Yes, you can run surveys. Yes, you can go on Slack groups or do focus groups, but your insights are going to be surface level insights. They're going to be at the top of this iceberg. Because whenever we're in a groupthink situation or in a public space, we tend to put on an aura that we are more collected, we are more put together. This is just human psychology. All of us do it. However, when we go into one-on-one interviews, that gives us the chance to dig deeper. We get into the subconscious of every person. If we are doing an in-depth 1 hour-long discovery interview, we're getting at their attitudes, their beliefs, their instincts, their value systems, their feelings. And the best designs are emotional designs. They design for emotion. One example, Tinder eliminated the fear of rejection and surpassed dating apps like Match.com and OkCupid that didn't know how to do that, right? So it's really emotional design or feeling-based design that leads to success. And that is why we really focus so much on discovery research and qualitative thinking. You might hear a lot of people online being like, oh, you don't really need research, or you really need bare bones research. And it's true, you can find ways to do bare bones research. But I would argue that those startups don't tend to be as innovative. And as you know, or may not know, about 80% of startups fail in, I believe, their first year of business. And that goes up to 90% or 95% by 3 years in business. They might not even get to start monetizing things. So when you hear things from startup founders about lean, that's great, but sometimes that just means half-baked, and that idea is not going to go anywhere. And you might not hear about that startup founder 2 or 3 or 5 years from now. With that, I'm going to get into the laws of UX. But on the other hand, actually, if you look at companies like Netflix, the really innovative ones, the ones that you see really making a big difference in their UI, in the way that they do things, they're constantly iterating and changing and innovating and evolving. Netflix, to me, is one of those constantly evolving, highly creative, innovative places. Spotify is another one of them. You can see that they invest heavily into both qualitative and quantitative research, as well as machine learning and AI research. So with that, I'm going to get into the laws of UX. Apple is another one. I have a little bit of ADD. Okay, so why are we talking about the laws of UX? Because I want to show you that we don't really need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to the UI. I talk to so many different folks who are so excited about UX design, but really, according to Jacob's laws, users spend most of their time on other websites and application rather than yours, and their mental models are formulated around existing digital patterns already. So that means we have to build according to the mental models of today and according to how products of today look and feel and how we can interact with today's products. So that doesn't mean we're really necessarily reinventing the wheel all the time when it comes to the actual UI and the interaction patterns. So one example of this is Netflix is the OG in streaming. They were the first streamers to do it. They first started streaming online through the internet and through our laptops. Eventually, other streamers entered the market. And now we have apps like Roku TV where you can, access a bunch of different streaming and gaming platforms. But if you notice, everyone copies the OG, right? Netflix sort of set the standard for what the interface of a streaming service needs to look like because they were the first to do it. And everyone copied, including TVs, TV designs for like Roku TV, for example. I used to work for Comcast X-Class TV, same thing, all repetition. Uh, but that doesn't mean that we're just copying all the time. In fact, Netflix, as they're growing and evolving, realized that during the pandemic that people were not paying as much attention to them. And it wasn't that they were paying attention to other streaming services, but there was actually indirect competition, right? We were on TikTok scrolling for hours during the pandemic. We might be on Spotify listening to a bunch of playlists rather than watching a TV show, or we might be even doing some good old channel surfing. So Netflix actually studied that sort of behavior patterns, interaction patterns. And in 2021, they released something called Play Something. This is no longer a feature. They used to have it. They probably beta tested it and then released it and realized it didn't work as well as they had hoped. So it's really fun to watch how Netflix kind of tests a bunch of ideas. And Play Something let you kind of channel surf on the platform. But it didn't really stick. It wasn't as interactive as I would say TikTok, which is I think maybe why it failed. But it's interesting to see how some of the most innovative companies are still looking for inspiration from other companies, both direct and indirect competitors, to do better. Right now, Netflix is getting into gaming and sports, and I think that's really cool as well. So remember, as you're designing, you don't need to always reinvent the wheel. Can your design be so good that it's almost invisible? When I go on Netflix, I don't have to think. I turn my brain off. Somehow the algorithm prioritizes what I was most recently watching. When I'm done watching it, it goes to the next episode, or it recommends a bunch of very relevant content for me. And somehow I always find a way to be engaged. When I was going on, HBO, which is now Max, or Amazon, or even Disney Plus, though I used to work there, don't tell anyone I said this, the interface was just clunkier, right? It was not as easy to navigate or intuit what to do next or where to find something next. In fact, for other streaming platforms to this day, you have to kind of know what you want to watch. And it's really hard to discover new content, in my opinion. But um, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Next is Hicks law. So the time to make a decision increases with the amount or complexity of choices. So Netflix, actually, when they were the OG streamer, really won in the market because they were able to provide a whole repository of content to us, and they completely put Blockbuster out of business and other video and DVD companies out of business with that ability to instantly access such a large repository of digital content. But as we move through time, TikTok comes along, and TikTok is just showing you one piece of content at a time, which means that we're much more easily engaged with apps like TikTok. So Netflix had to, rethink things, right? Which is why they started to think about Play Something, because now there was just too much choice. And so they had to tackle that as well. Amazon is another big name that uses Hicks law with their one-click checkout or one-click buy, which is actually patented. Do you know the only other company that does the one-click buy, as far as I know, is Apple in Apple Music, because Apple has to license this feature from Amazon. And I guess that not many companies are able to, pay the price to license the one-click buy. But Amazon is the most efficient way to buy because they make the checkout process so easy, right? Usual checkout processes tend to be 3 to 5 steps, and people get lost in those steps. But Amazon is able to really streamline their sales because of the one-click buy. So again, reducing the decision time and the complexity of choices. But I also have to bring up ethics, right? In this day and age, we're thinking about the ethics of these companies Do we trust Amazon? Yes, we trust them to deliver consistently to us. They're very convenient, but I don't know if we all agree on their ethics or their value systems or the way they treat warehouse workers. And so you're seeing kind of a shift to kind of pull away from some of these bigger companies as well. And this has not been going on just now. It's been going on. This article is from 2018. So it's been going on for a while, but it's just become more prominent in the headlines recently. Same thing with Facebook. And so, one thing we really challenge our students at UX Women to do is to also think of ethical and inclusive design considerations. We really cater to women, immigrants, people of color, the LGBTQ community, and a lot of times folks who come from these communities are part of invisible communities, invisible markets, and they're able to leverage their experiences firsthand to design something that the mainstream has just ignored. One really good example of this is Rihanna's Fenty Beauty, right? Before Rihanna's Fenty Beauty came along, yes, the makeup industry was super saturated. And yes, if you started a makeup company, chances are you were more likely to fail just because there's just so much competition, so many big names with so many resources worth billions of dollars. However, Rihanna chose a different approach. She was able to recognize that most makeup brands at that time only provided 30 shades of foundation, and that didn't work for everyone. And so she had friends who had lighter skin tones and darker skin tones who just weren't able to find their color match. And so Fenty Beauty came up with as many as 50 shades and released more nuanced shades, which then led to them becoming $1 billion company almost immediately. So it was their inclusive design principles, their inclusive marketing strategy, and their ability to find a blue ocean in an otherwise saturated space that led to that level of business dominance. Rihanna, yes, might be a celebrity, but there's no way that other big celebrities like Selena Gomez or maybe J.Lo are making as much money as she's making with Fenty Beauty. And so it was a really thoughtful business and inclusive design strategy as well. So really think about the ethics and emotions around what you're designing for, especially if you're choosing a new project topic or you're thinking of an idea that doesn't exist before. We really heavily focus on innovation. So I also wanted to give you just a quick 10-minute design MBA to get a sense of why this is so important. Why am I stressing business so much? Not just because of the layoffs and trying to, seem more valuable as a designer or researcher at a company, but if you understand business and if you understand how innovation processes work, you can more likely choose out a company that, has better value systems, or you can start that company for yourself if those value systems do not exist in today's world. So with that, what does the design process look like from a business perspective? Usually when a startup starts, they are doing a lot of discovery interviews or business sales interviews. And based on those interviews, they're building something called an MVP or minimum viable product. They continue iterating on this MVP. It's almost like throwing darts on a board, and they might change up the product multiple times until they get to something called product market fit. And product market fit happens when they first start to monetize their product. And the demand for the product, I'm not just talking about monetizing as in a couple of sales, but I'm talking about consistent demand for the product to the point where they're spending, maybe at the MVP phase, they were spending 90% of their time on product development. At product market fit, they're maybe spending 50% of their time on product, 50% of their time on marketing. And as they're growing, they spend more and more time on operations rather than product. So they're at channel product fit, they're trying to reach more audiences. So they might spend 60 to 90% of their time on operations, marketing, sales, and maybe 10% of their time on product on the product itself, right? So after the MVP, it just becomes about constantly streamlining and making that original product more efficient, more nuanced through different versions of that product. Finally, we get to a maturity stage. They might have scaled to different countries, different cities, and so there might need to be some sort of localization or regulatory changes to the product depending on where it is being supplied or where it's being used. So that's where, you might come up with multiple versions of a product if you're working in a large corporate. And so I just wanted to give you kind of this life cycle of a startup so you can understand the differences about working in a startup versus corporate. And so, when you're at that, problem solution fit area, usually the founders are doing a lot of sales calls or what we call in the UX world, discovery interviews. And so these interviews are really crucial to build something innovative and unique and really not, repeat things, right? Not build another copycat of Hinge or Tinder, but have a unique spin on it. What's the differentiator? The only way you're going to find a really unique take is if you identify a unique market and you ask questions that lead to unique insights. At that point, you start to, design multiple ideas and concepts. And it's a lot like throwing darts on the wall in terms of kind of landing on what that successful MVP will be. At this stage, you might be building prototypes. You will be doing something called prototyping, where you're trying to come up with more quantitative methods to really validate what your idea is and justify to investors or stakeholders that, hey, this idea is going to win in the market, and here's the quantitative proof, and here's why it's going to win above other different ideas. And then finally, you get to a point called product market fit, where you're selling your product or service, and now you're just finding new ways to attract customers and target audiences. You're A/B testing things, and you're really trying to grow into channel product fit, where you're reaching new types of users and really growing the market or reaching new types of users rather than just your early adopters. And so that's kind of the scope of what UX Woman focuses on, is that ability to build something unique from scratch, because that really is the best way to learn about the end-to-end design process, how to build a design systems from scratch, how to build a business model from scratch, how to scope a project, which is more of a mid to senior level skill set, rather than just doing production level tasks or learning Figma, which is not the only thing you need to learn to break into tech today. So with that, I'll talk about some career paths. Now that you've gotten a sense of what design is, what design thinking is, I hope this gives you a chance to evaluate different education resources appropriately. But there's different terminologies for how design is practiced, but there's similarities and commonalities across all these modes of design. So again, you've heard me say design thinking. Design thinking is the iterative process of reframing and re-understanding user problems at a deeper level. It's interdisciplinary, it's innovative. That's what leads to unique solutions, unlike, cookie cutter, let me just copy my competitor kind of solutions, which don't really lead anywhere and could lead to high levels of startup failure, which startups already fail a lot. An example of design thinking at play is building innovative products like Airbnb or Uber, which was a completely new way of interacting with the world, a new take on users, a new take on the hospitality industry. Service design is the practice of improving an organization's internal practices, processes, and pooling of company resources to positively affect employees and indirectly the customers. So a lot of you, if you work in healthcare, sales, customer service, admin work, education, you might already be doing service design. If you've ever had to optimize a product or service, and you've managed to save costs or reduce time or make a process more efficient at work, that's all service design. And service design is usually done at consulting firms. Usually, when I first started my career, I would be brought in to these big companies to optimize their internal processes. So I would, work with J&J, for example, and optimize some internal software for them that helped them with their production and their operations, and streamline things internally. And so really consider service design if you are someone who is transitioning mid-career and who might have transferable skills from other companies and other career paths. If you've probably already done this type of work. When I started my career, I was a customer service manager at a small education startup. And basically what I was doing was service design. I was optimizing internal processes of the company for software developers, for marketing and sales processes. But I was also doing some UX work or kind of scoping out my own UX work to help me transition into UX. Customer experience design, or CX, considers the end-to-end customer experience, which means both before and after conversion. So that could include marketing materials, emails, the website, the product itself or the app, and then maybe customer service support experiences or marketing post-purchase experiences or upsells and kind of engagement with existing customers. So that's exactly what I just said. UX, though, on the other hand, is really more focused, or product design is more focused on the actual product itself. So you're less focused on email marketing designs or ad designs, and you're more focused on really refining the product and rethinking the product to satisfy user needs. UI is even more specific, and it's the process of creating digital interfaces, and it's within kind of the UX world. I really like visuals to kind of help me see what all these different terminologies are. So here's one of them. Systems design or design thinking is kind of the overarching social innovation component that we talked about, and it is applicable across all types of product design, right? So whether you're designing a piece of machinery, a physical product, a piece of furniture, an interior space, a film, what else? Cooking food for a restaurant, that's all systems thinking and design systems and design thinking innovation. However, as you kind of narrow in on digital design, you come across more service design, UX design, and UI design. Just another way of looking at the pie. And that's pretty much it. We are right on time. It's 4:40, so I hope you leave the session feeling empowered to act on some of your ideas and inspired to dive into UX if you've been sort of on the fence about whether UX is the right career path for you. And I hope, you feel that you leave with a different perspective than when you started and allow yourself to change your mindset to rethink your ideas. If there's one thing you can learn, it's really about mindsets and unlearning a lot of what we learn in school about having things be perfect, having things be worth an A grade. Design is all about iteration and failure. And so it's a very different mindset. And that's the biggest thing we coach at UX Woman is the mindset shift on how to succeed in design. If you would like to learn more about UX Woman, I'm happy to give you information in the chat. You can go to, let me see, www.uxwoman.com. And we have a whole lot of resources there. So we have, and I'll just explain them really quickly. We have a Slack community, we have a LinkedIn group, we have a Reddit group, we have a lot of online forums that you can be a part of, and we have free courses as well. So we have free UX design courses, a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to, and free events like this one. But I'll pause here to kind of see if anyone has any questions, and I'm happy to answer them. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and I'll stick around for the next 10 minutes or so to answer them. Thanks for joining. Really great that, so many people tuned into the call. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Yes, you can apply for the UX apprenticeship on our website. And as someone who is just starting to dive into this field and going through a course, what would be your overall number one tip for getting started? Monica, I would really recommend uh, finding a focus as you go through the courses that you do. So really think about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and what specific career path is best for you in the UX field. Is it UX research? Is it UX design? Is it UX? Is it service design? Are you more attuned to work at a startup or corporate or consulting? The more you can get focused on even what industries you want to specialize in, choose 1 to 2 industries. So whether it's healthcare or education or e-commerce or B2B software as a service, it's important to find a focus. The biggest mistake career changers make is that they're too general and they're trying to apply for everything and anything. And that means that their applications don't come across as very focused. So they're trying to apply as a researcher and designer. Their portfolio has 5 different industries and it doesn't really show focus. So the more you can show focus and develop that focus for yourself, the more successful you'll be. What are some of your biggest tips for a student trying to break into the field? I think I would see if UX is the right thing for you in the first place before you invest any time and money into it. So definitely look at, free YouTube videos that we have, talks like this one, the Google Coursera course. And only if you feel like it, UX really scratches that itch to design something, to be creative. And if you can really see yourself do this as a career, then I would invest more time and effort and resources into landing a UX job and additional learning as needed. So first take the time to see if UX is the right career path for you in the first place. As a student, there's multiple career paths open to you. So don't, pigeonhole yourself just because it's easy. Awesome. Great to hear you're joining the Slack community. What advice would you have for someone starting to look for jobs but don't exactly know where they may fit right away? So again, I would recommend taking the time to find that focus, right? What's the number one UX career path you would go for? What are top 1 to 2 industries? And, do you prefer to work at a startup, consulting, or corporate role? There's a personality quiz on our website that you can take to see what career path might best suit you and what type of work might suit you. And then really make sure you're focused with your job applications once you find your focus. What are some ways to stand out in the job market as a junior designer? Again, it's about number one is about finding the focus. Number two, I will say, is having a unique approach. So the reason that UX Woman focuses on innovative project topics and we get students to scope their own project topic ideas is so that our students can target the 1 or 2 industries that they're really excited about. And ideally, those industries coincide with where industries they might have expertise with in the past. So if you come from a healthcare background, definitely lean into UX for healthcare. If you come from an education background, definitely lean into UX for education. And really take that time to come up with unique ideas and unique approaches to problems, unique ways of thinking, right? You want your portfolio and the projects that you display on your resume to be unique, to be interesting, to have both qualitative and quantitative impact. And that's what's going to help you stand out from the crowd in terms of being a designer. We do have advice on career searching and videos as well in our emails and our videos. So Hope, I would recommend, it would take a whole hour just to talk about interviews. So I would recommend taking a look at our emails and videos for more of the job search advice. Do you have any advice on someone transitioning from computer science to UX? Yes, I would say focus more on UX strategy roles and your understanding of technical scoping of, software, because that's your strong point. Yes, I'll be sending out the video or sharing it to YouTube. I don't do portfolio reviews on these types of calls, but you can book a portfolio review with me through our services page on the website. And yes, you can sign up for the design conference. There are tickets available, so definitely recheck it because there should be tickets available. I heard that many UX designers don't have a degree, but the industry becomes very competitive, so degree is helpful to even start to work as UXD. What do you think about it? I would say I think it's more about transferable skills. So if you have existing work expertise, definitely lean on that. That's your biggest asset. I don't think you need a degree. We've worked with students who don't have a degree. We've worked with students who don't have bachelor's degrees, and they've been able to land six-figure UX jobs. Do you think that learning design thinking can help me better app, rather focus on, okay. So design thinking is just the design process, and it is a process of building applications. A lot of times startups and smaller companies skip the design process by going straight to development or having the engineers do some ideation or the founders do some ideation. But design thinking is the process of designing, and it's a way of bringing others along in your process as well. So when you're if you really know design thinking and the design process, you should be able to educate other people on your team to also apply the design thinking process. So yeah, tips to learn business strategy and scope case studies. We do that at UX Woman in our 7-month UX Design MBA. As far as I know, we are the only bootcamp that does this. If there's others, I don't know of them. But that's why we call ourselves a design MBA, because the only other place you really do this is in an MBA program. And you can, look at case studies like from Y Combinator, startup case studies. I really like TechCrunch, how I built this. So there's lots of paths into entrepreneurship and UX entrepreneurship. So again, I can't answer the focus for everyone, right? It really involves me having a call with you about your specific career path, your passions, what you did in the past, where you went to school. So take the personality quiz because in a few minutes, I won't be able to answer that. And then check out our emails to gain more insight into how to really find the focus for yourself. We have tips that we publish on a weekly basis. Coding is not a skill set needed for design. I would say to lean into more strategy rather than coding. And especially when building a portfolio, you can always just use a pre-made website like Squarespace. It doesn't really add to anything if you've coded your website from scratch. So this is someone who's worked in graphic design for 4+ years, Christina. I would recommend actually going for mid to senior level roles because graphic design is very adjacent to UX. We've actually worked with a lot of graphic designers in our program and helped them transition into senior product design roles and double their salaries. So I think you're selling yourself short if you go for more junior level roles. All right, I think most of these are, so in our 7-month design MBA program, Mia, we have students who join us for every cohort. So that's why I keep saying students. And it's great to hear that the Eventbrite problem was resolved. So Alexandra, you can find the quiz on our website. It's the first thing that you see when you land on the homepage. All right, I think I got through all the questions. So thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it and hope to see you in another session. Thank you so much.